All right, we're ready to go. So we are Christen and Kevin. If you joined us last week, we wanted to say, 2 weeks ago, we want to say thank you, and we're glad that you came back for the second one. So we're Christen and Kevin. We are food and garden geeks. We've cooked up some awesome things we want to show you today. We're going to go over some helpful tips for making delicious homemade sauces and salsa. We're going to, the humble tomato is so super versatile, and it's just an absolute kitchen staple. And so it's one of my most favorite fruits in our garden because it's just used in so many different ways. So we're going to go over some of the different ways that we celebrate the tomato in our kitchen. We'll go over ways and techniques and tricks of things that you can use right away with your tomatoes that you have right now. And if they're anything like ours, you're probably overrun. And then we're also going to show you some ways that you can preserve some of these flavors and come back to them throughout the season, throughout the winter. Ways you can enjoy this like all year long. So first up, without any further ado, we're going to get right on into salsa. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right, salsa. We're going to start there. The first and most important thing in anything you're making is picking the right ingredient for the recipe. And for this, it's all about tomatoes. So when you're making salsa, you want to pick a tomato that you're going to be able to skin fairly easily. We're going to blanch these to get the skin off, which we'll go over in a minute. But so what you're looking for is just a good, smooth, round tomato where there's not going to be a lot of blemishes. You can see here with this heirloom variety, you've got lots of kind of crevices and everything like that. That would be a tough one to get the skin off of. So not a good salsa tomato. Great salad or slicing or sauce tomato, but not quite good for salsa. Even a Roma can make a good salsa tomato, low in moisture content, so you get some good meat out of it. Again, nice and easy to peel one like that. Other things you want to look out for sometimes with tomatoes is, if they have a lot of these kind of cracks and stuff on the tops, it doesn't mean it's a bad tomato. It makes a great sauce tomato, but again, that's going to make getting the skin off kind of tough. This tends to happen if when the tomato is close to ripe, they get overwatered. So, if you water your tomatoes too heavily when they're close to ripe, you can crack the skin. Or even if we get like a big rainstorm when they're close to ripe, the skin can split open. So
like growing pains or like stretch marks?
Just like growing pains and stretch marks. So, if we're going to get a big rainstorm, sometimes we'll pick the tomatoes that are close to ripe just to put them on the windowsill rather than, finish them off on the vine. So, moving on from that, we've got our 2 tomatoes that we're going to pick for the salsa. Just going to get that up to a good boil. So the first thing you got to do is you want to cut the stem out of them. Roma, you can just kind of chop the top off. The next thing you want to do is you just want to cut a small X in the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but just kind of carve a small X in the bottom, about 2 inches by 2 inches, and remove that stem. And what that's going to do is it's going to help the skin to kind of release and crack from there.
Yeah, so this is called blanching, right?
Yeah, so we're blanching these, just a quick blanch. So we're going to lower them into the boiling water. And you just want to kind of, move them around, give them a spin. Sometimes the aromas, and most of the time the aromas like to float, so you just want to kind of hold them under. Just doing 2 or 3 at a time. You want to keep that water as close to a boil as possible. This takes...
What are we looking for?
It takes about 15 to 20 seconds. What you're looking for is you want that, as soon as that skin starts to kind of split open a little bit and wrinkle, you want to take it out of there, get it in the ice bath as fast as possible to stop the cooking, to keep them as garden fresh as possible without cooking them too much. This little burner here is not quite as battle hardy as the oven top, so it's taking an extra second. Usually it takes about 10 to 15 seconds. So you just want those to kind of cool off immediately. And turn that burner off for a second. Like I said, you just want to get these cooled down as quick as you can. If they don't get into that ice bath quick, they'll continue to cook, and the salsa will be a lot softer. It'll be a little saucier. The edge of the tomatoes will be, mushy. Mushy, exactly.
Mushy.
That's the word for it. That's the word.
Mushy tomatoes.
So after they're nice and cool, you can feel it. And right where we carved that X, you can see the skin, just kind of peels right off. So we just throw that right in a little scrap bowl there. Aroma, again, starting right at the bottom where you cut that X, and that skin will peel right off nice and easy for you. So after you've got the skin off on those.
Can I steal your ice glass?
Yes.
I don't want our people to miss the fun that you're going to be doing here.
So after you've got your, the skins off, you just quarter the tomatoes. And for this type, just over the bowl, you can kind of, just with your thumb, you just squeeze all the seeds out of them. Get any last bit of that green stem that's left out. Just gives it can give you an off texture in the salsa. So these seeds, if you were doing a bigger batch, what I do is I would actually, strain these seeds and I'd save the juice out of it also. It makes a great tomato juice. So pretty quick process. We can go through these nice. Last year we grew Campari tomatoes for salsa because they're a really sweet tomato, great tasting. But they're kind of like a cherry tomato that they grow on vines and they're a little smaller, so it can take a little longer because you might have to use like 25 of them to make a salsa, but they're a really good sweet tomato. We grew some bigger varieties this year.
It was like, what, almost an hour and a half to make a salsa that took us about 5 seconds to eat. So the big tomatoes and the juicy ones definitely help.
Yeah, you definitely took more energy out making a salsa than you got back from eating. But very tasty.
That's why they say it's like 0 calories, right?
Exactly.
More energy exerted.
Yeah, it's like eating a carrot. Except a lot tastier.
A lot tastier.
These aromas, again, we'll just get the seeds out of there. Kind of cut that last little piece of stem out. If you see any other, blemishes, you cut those out as well. But you want to keep as much skin on the tomato as you can before you blanch it. You don't want to boil the tomato. So cut the bad parts out after you blanch it. All right, get that aside.
Yeah.
So depending on whether you like, a chunkier salsa or not, is just basically in how fine you chop it. So usually just a couple at a time. I go for like 1/4-inch thick slices. Take them, you spin them the other way. Run it back through. And these are the aromas, so they've got really good texture. They're not quite as soft as the heirloom tomatoes or some of the other varieties. So they're a good one to leave a little larger. And just drop them into a colander over, it's just a measuring cup or a bowl, just so you can kind of drain the juice out of it.
Yeah, the reason that you're putting it in the colander is to get it basically as dry as possible, right?
Yeah, you don't want to really like a soupy salsa. You want it to be a lot meatier. So we're going to try to strain a lot of the liquid out. So there is a lot of liquid in tomatoes. You'll see in a minute when we grab the batch from earlier that's been draining for a bit. And then, we've got some of those bigger chunks in there, so I'll dice this one a little bit finer, just to blend it all together.
I want to eat it now. Nice.
Just got one more to go. And usually, if we're having dinner, whether it's, tacos or we're having nachos or something, we'll usually use 4 or 5 average-sized tomatoes for that. So that'll make a nice little, just kind of side-size snack.
Well, we like a little tacos with our salsa.
Yeah. Yeah, you put enough effort into this, you kind of want it to be the main dish. All right. So once you've got that in your colander, you can go ahead and add a little salt to it, and that's going to help drain that liquid out of there.
You can already see it starting to drip pretty good.
So you just want to salt that.
Why are you salting it?
The salt helps draw out the moisture. It's going to help pull that water out of the cells. So just give that a little stir to get the salt going, get it evenly distributed, and then kind of push the tomatoes up against the side, kind of like a reverse volcano inside, just so it has a place to drain, so it's not just kind of ponding up on side of itself. So we're going to, through the magic of television, we're going to swap this up for a little stuff that's been earlier. You want to let this drain for minimum 15 minutes to a half hour, but it's best to let it drain for an hour or two.
Oh, definitely. And no, we don't normally keep our salsa in the oven.
All right, and you can see here, this is a little bit larger batch, but we've got about 3 cups of tomato juice that came out of these 5 tomatoes. And kind of for one last little ring, you can take your spatula and just kind of push it up against the side a bit. Just get that last little bit of liquid out. And then transfer that into a bowl so you can start mixing your salsa.
All that juice.
So you can see out of 5 tomatoes, it kind of, that really comes down a bit. You'll get about twice as much tomato juice as you will tomato meat for the salsa. But this is a loved resource in our house. This will make a really good Bloody Mary, really fresh, really good just tomato juice anyway. It's got a little bit of salt in it, but especially if you watched that class 2 weeks ago when we pickled the jalapenos, if you put some of that jalapeno brine mixed in with this tomato juice, you'll get a really nice spicy tomato Bloody Mary mix.
Or V8.
Or V8.
With only just one vegetable.
No judgment. No judgment. So we're going to save that for later.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow morning, because tomorrow's still not the weekend. All right, so then, some ingredients that we use in salsa that I like to use. The other thing that's really nice about this is you really are just building it to the way your flavor profile likes it. So, we like a little bit of garlic in ours. So this is just, about 3 cloves, crushed garlic. We like a little bit of heat. And this time of year, we've also got, a good amount of peppers growing. So I've got 2 good-sized older jalapenos in here. They're spicy. Trust me, I touched my face after I chopped them. I can verify that. So they're good heat there.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 different kinds of onions. So different onions will give you different flavors. First, we have a little small chopped up white onion that we grew this year. This is a more traditional salsa onion. It's it's got a little bit of bite to it. We like a lot of onion in there, so we're going to throw that whole onion on top.
We like everything.
And I know, any vegetables we can throw in there. And then also we happen to have a shallot, which is a little bit more of a sweeter, garlicky flavored onion. So these are really tasty. Also a little less bite, but like I said, a little sweeter, a little bit more of that garlic flavor.
Plus it adds nice color.
And yeah, you gotta like the colors. The green of the jalapeno, the white of the onion, the red tomato. It's just a really good, pretty combination. So after that, you want to give it a good little splash of olive oil, a good olive oil.
A glug, you say.
A glug, as some would say. And lemon juice. We just have a cut lemon here. You can buy these little kind of elastic screens to put over them, so you can just squeeze that in there without the seeds getting in. You just want to give a little bit of acid. You don't want to go for all of it at the same time. It's easier to add more later than take it out. Trust me, you can't get that back out of there once it's in.
You already put in the lemon. So
the acid of the lemon just kind of helps balance the flavor against the oil of the olive oil. So it kind of just cuts that a little bit and gives it a better balanced flavor. So give that a good mix.
Oh my God. I know you guys can't smell it, but trust me when I say that is, that is some very, very great smelling salsa.
And then, a little more salt in there. In case my Dr. Lynn is watching, I did not put more salt in there. But put a little more salt in there. All right, so you get that nice and mixed in. And then just give it a taste. It's the funnest part. You've got your assumption of what you want it to taste like. So now you kind of, it's got great heat. Good onion, tomato. Use a little more salt.
A lot of the salt came out when you were draining it, right? And it's not actually as salty as it looks.
A lot of the salt that you put in from when you're draining that liquid out ends up in that tomato juice, not in the meat. So you do have to add, more salt after. A little bit more onion, lemon.
Oh man.
And now this should be
Perfect.
right on. Do you want to be my taste tester?
Oh yeah. I just really kind of thought you would never ask. Okay. There's nothing else needed.
Yep. So then you've got
except the tacos.
Except the tacos.
Except the tacos.
That's for dinner after the video.
That's a whole other episode.
And then you've got a nice meaty salsa that's not too liquidy. A lot of times when you try to make a homemade salsa, you just chop the tomatoes and go right for it. You're gonna have a lot of juice. When you put that in a taco, it's gonna make the shell get a little soggy. So that's gonna be a nice drier, meatier salsa for you.
And we keep that in the fridge. I mean, we've actually never had to keep it in the fridge because it really never lasts that long. But this is a much bigger batch than we normally make, and that stays in the fridge for like a good 3 days, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be fine for 3 to 5 days in the fridge as a good fresh snack.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Nice fresh garden salsa.
Love it. I'm super into it. All right. So what else do we want to show them? I think we're gonna move into sauce.
Salsa.
All right. So that's your salsa. Keep in mind, there's a million other things in your garden that you can use with that. Sometimes we'll even put some basil in there to make it a little bit more of a rich flavor. But I think now the piece that we should get into is tomato sauce. At this point, if your garden or your farmer's market is anything like our experience, you're overrun with tomatoes. We're heading outside with a gigantic laundry basket and we're filling it up with tomatoes. This is going to be probably our, third or fourth time making tomato sauce this season?
Yeah.
And this is definitely we're in the middle, so we'll probably have 2 more sauces to make. And that's really good because actually what we're going to show you today, there's a lot of varying uses for this. So we're going to show you how to make your tomato sauce 2 different ways. Not everybody, takes their sauce as seriously as we do. We use a food mill because we're doing our sauce, like I said, almost 7-10 times, in a season. Sometimes even more if our tomatoes are it's just too much to keep up with. And we use our food mill for several other things that we do in our food processing. So we're going to demonstrate how to use the food mill. But if you happen to not have one of these, they're super inexpensive, by the way. You can find them in most places where you would find your canning goods. It's shockingly inexpensive. But when we show you how fast that processes tomatoes, you'll not want to be doing it by hand. Trust us. So to start off with our tomatoes, I'm just going to show you. This is the batch that we're going to deal with today. These are all of the tomatoes that Kevin talked about before, except it's got our super heirloom ugly tomatoes in here. There is a variety called ugly tomatoes, and once we heard that name, we've just been calling all of these little bruisers ugly tomatoes. But they're actually our favorite, so we say it with deep affection. To start processing this by hand, you're actually going to use that same technique that Kevin just gave you for salsa. So you would be using a bigger pot and you would be blanching tomatoes in batches at a time. And do you put them in the ice bath after you do that?
For sauce, you don't have to do the ice bath.
Okay. Yeah, so you'd skip the ice bath part, but you're going to start processing the tomatoes. You're going to need a lot of counter space if you're going to take on a big batch of tomatoes. This is a manageable amount, I think, doing it by hand. It's still going to take a little bit of time. So once you've blanched your tomatoes and you've cored your tomatoes, now you're left with basically de-skinned, de-seeded meat. Basically the part where before he started chopping it up. We will pick it up from there after we show you how to use the food mill, where we're going to give you some recipes on how to actually make a beautiful pasta sauce. A nice little tomato sauce. So I think we should get right into using the mill.
Yeah. So
Why don't you set that sucker up for us?
yeah, I'll explain how to set this up real quick. It's simple. They set up in about 30 seconds. They just simply clamp right on the counter. There's just a little hopper for the cut tomatoes. You get a little sticker to put the tomatoes in there, so you don't have to use your hands. You want to keep all your fingers. And basically, you get your tailings out of this end, which is going to be the seeds and the skins. So you just want a little bin for those, and then you want kind of a bigger pan to catch the. This is where the juice and the pulp is going to come down this little slide of fun here.
Slide of fun. All right. So to use the food mill, we don't have to cut out the stems, and we don't have to cut out that core. So you're basically just going to grab out your tomato the way that you got it out of your garden, give it a rinse because it has been outside. There's bird activity or whatever out there. So definitely give them a rinse. But that's it. You can pretty much just go from your garden to getting right into processing your sauce. And in fact, we picked most of these today to be able to do that. So they basically went right from the vine to here. So I'm going to be making chunks, these little tiny chunks. They're roughly the size of the diameter of his of the hammer that he's going to use to plunge down the tomatoes. And so over time, I've gotten used to what size they have to be in order for him to use the mill. And we've gotten this down to a science now. So I'm just going to start chunking them up, and we're just going to get ready to rock.
Oh, and another pro tip. You're in one of those Fitbit walking challenges. Put your Fitbit on your cranking hand. You'll get some bonus steps.
Wait a minute. I think I have my coworkers on here, and you just gave away my biggest secret.
I always do the grinding.
Man.
She's no cheater.
I'm not a cheater. I swear.
I will.
I swear. And so I'm just making chunks. You can see that it's coming down the slide here. The juice is going to start filling this guy up. It's probably a little harder to see against our dark background, but once we get a little bit more juice in there, you'll start seeing it.
You got a good shot there of the skins and seeds coming out. You don't want to get chopped by your chopping partners, so keep an eye out there. And you don't want to overload the hopper. The tomatoes are going to kind of get jammed up, so I just throw them in a couple at a time. But it goes really fast. This is much quicker than the blanching and hand de-seeding. So this is why if you're going to do more than, a couple plants worth of tomatoes, it really is worth getting the mill.
Yeah.
It's going to go much, much quicker.
Oh, definitely. The cool part too, the part that I really like about it is I love watching the color of the tomato juice that comes down because different tomatoes all give off a different juice. So like the Roma tomatoes will give off this like really bright colored pulp, but these little ugly guys that are completely ripe, they have that little bit of green on the top, but their meat is really, it's also like a dark green kind of maroonish color. What's cool about these guys is that when you see it all in here mixing together, it makes it look like the sauce is actually darker and already more rich. So it's a nice little, colors it up pretty nice. The final product of your sauce ends up looking much darker, which I always think looks better against all of the ingredients that we add into it. So we're just going to demonstrate this until this guy's full, and we'll share a couple other tricks. When you're going through your tomatoes to chop, to put them through the mill, you want to just double check every now and again. Check the insides, make sure there's nothing to cut out. We very rarely have any critters or anything in there, but occasionally you could get a spot on the tomato that might just be like a little more bruised, or you know what you're looking for with something you wouldn't eat. And so you're basically just looking to chop out the parts that you don't feel good about, or anything that you would call suspect. So I think we can do a couple more in here, right?
Yeah, we'll do a couple more.
Get them through. Runaway tomato. Yeah, let's get this bad boy in here.
Yep.
So I would say in any given time, we're probably saucing about 3 to 4 different varieties of tomatoes. There's some people who are really, adamant about other different tomatoes or what they like. It really goes on your own taste bud. And when you start making sauce, pretty religiously, you'll figure out what ones you really like and which ones you don't like. And so over time, we found that a really awesome blend of 4 tomatoes. That's really kind of been our sweet spot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always do the plum tomatoes or the paste tomatoes, those heirloom ugly tomatoes.
Oh yeah.
Some kind of hybrid. The other thing we do always is all these little scraps that come out in the first go round. I always run them through a second time. You'll get you can see this bin's almost full of the tailings. But there's a lot more juice to be had in there on the second go. So I run through one final time. And if you could see there, it's
that's a lot of juice.
There's a lot more juice coming out of there.
You don't have to do this part, but we're pretty frugal. We want every single drop out of those tomatoes. It's not for nothing. It's a big endeavor to do, so you might as well. You can see that was like a lot of juice that came out of that.
Yeah, and you can see it kind of turned that whole pan into, just a quarter. So we got another 3/4 of a pot of juice out of that.
It was like basically a whole other tomato.
Yeah.
Do you want a big bowl?
Yeah, we'll get a bowl to pour that into.
All right, so you're on canvas, and now you can't spell it.
So I definitely can. Just hopefully don't. So making tomato sauce is a little bit of a messy process. But you can see we got a whole, pot of sauce out of that, less than a bowl of those tomatoes. So that's going to cook down quite a bit. But good bowl.
So essentially, that is the beginning that you would be using to make your tomato sauce. I'm watching the clock here. I would say that probably just took us about 9 minutes or 10 minutes, I think, to process that big giant bowl of tomatoes. If you had done that by hand, you would still be at it now because there's so many extra steps when you do it by hand than using that food mill. So it's absolutely a critical kitchen tool for sure. And that is a lot of sauce. So what we're going to do with that sauce is we're going to want to cook that down. Almost, we usually cook our sauce down about 75%. The reason that we cook our sauce down about 75% is because we typically use our sauce for a lot of different things. We'll make our sauce. We'll cook it down into 75. We will use it as a barbecue sauce base. We will use it sometimes as like a pizza sauce base. Super thick. So we like to really get that moisture out and really enhance that flavor, like a lot of flavor. So cooking it down to about 75% is going to, it's going to give you a sauce. Let me just stir this guy here. Turn that down just a little bit because he's doing a little bit of extra bubbling. So because you don't have 8 hours to watch us boil sauce, we spent all day today boiling down about that much tomato. And it now fills this, what is this guy? What size pan is that?
That's a 4-quart.
Like the 4-quart. So as you can see in here, or maybe you can't, so I'll describe it. It's about halfway. It's like right there on the pot. So that whole gigantic bowl just cooked down to right here. And it's thick, but I want it thick. And the reason why I want that sauce right now to be cooked so thick is because now I'm going to add some really, really, really fun stuff into it. We're going to start to build a really beautiful pasta sauce. If you would use the process for the salsa where you had chopped things, if you wanted your sauce extra thin, you would use like an immersion blender and make it nice and thin. And it would come out about the consistency that we had with that sauce. Leave it chunky. You're in control of whatever your thickness and consistency is. When we make our sauce, we usually leave our sauce and can it at this state before it gets any ingredients. Mostly because we don't know when we're going to make it for dinner. You know, do we want to use it for shrimp? Do we want to use it for tofu? Do we want to use it for meatballs? This guy makes amazing meatballs. Do we like to leave our sauce very bare so that every time we go to use it, we can customize it? What I'm going to show you right now is probably, like, I would say it's like our go-to. You know, like, this is like the entertainment sauce. You know, the one that you put together, you got a whole bunch of people coming out for it. So I'm going to show you what I would typically do. And the very, very first ingredient that I'm going to put in here, and it's a little lost because my shirt's black. This is a little bit of wine. I highly recommend that you use a red wine in your pasta sauce. The flavor profile of it is it just really adds a really nice depth to it. I like to stick with a, usually like a really dark blend, sometimes a Malbec, a Chianti. You can use whatever your favorite wine is. It's a myth that you should never use your good wine for cooking. That is absolutely not true. We've used what we would call a garbage wine, and we used it for cooking thinking it would be, you know, what else would we use it for? And you taste it. You so taste it. So
doesn't taste good going. It's not going to taste good going.
Yeah. And so also, in case you're concerned about the alcohol content in wine, it's going to be boiling off. So that's why we're going to start right out of the gate with adding in our wine. I usually, for this amount of sauce in a pot, I would use one of these little guys. What is the ounces on this one?
That's about 8 ounces.
Okay, it's the 8 ounces. Like maybe roughly a cup. And so I'm going to put that in now because I want it to, I want the alcohol to kind of cook off a little bit. Well, I want it to totally cook off. The fun part about making sauce is that you can start and stop anything at any time. So this can be cooked as fast as you want it to, or you can simmer things for as long as you want things to marry. It's all about your time and the ingredients that you're going to add to it. So we've just added the wine. We're going to make sure that it's bubbling off the alcohol on there. If you don't bubble off the alcohol, it definitely tastes like yeah, thumbs down. It's like a weird fusion between, like, if you drop some ketchup into your wine glass. No one wins in that situation. It's awful. So you do want to boil off a little bit of that alcohol and get the real flavor of the wine in it.
It'll be obvious if you don't have it all cooked off. So.
Yeah, and
you don't have to worry about that. You'll know.
Yeah, you will know. You'll smell it. You can smell it, and you can continue to cook it and get there. So if you feel like you haven't done it, pop it back on. Keep it boiling. So I'm going to pull out over here a handful of my standard ingredients. You know, my entertainment sauce, if you will. And then here we have a little bit of a secret ingredient, but we won't know if we need this secret ingredient yet. So this little guy is going to bubbleate away. I'm just going to leave him. Make sure he doesn't stick to the bottom. You know, cook it at a nice simmer, but not high enough where you run the risk of burning anything to the bottom. My very, very, very first thing that I'm going to put into this is a roasted garlic. And so this is probably like 8 cloves because we're very garlicky. And this I would say is probably reserved. Like, this is reserved.
We're taking it easy for TV purposes.
We don't want to admit that we eat like bulbs of garlic and not cloves of garlic. Yeah, we don't need to judge. So in here is probably like 8 cloves. I chopped them up a little bit, put it into a little saucepan with butter, and I just cooked it down until it was nice and roasted and nice and caramelized. The butter and the oil get a little bit of a toasted brown color to them. The smell is just pretty much unbelievable. You really, it really lights up your whole house for sure. The next thing that I'm going to add is another ingredient that I already pre-cook. I pre-cook my ingredients, like the garlic and then this caramelized onion, because I really want the flavor of what they are to come through. If you got weird with it and put raw garlic and raw onion in there, you'd basically be cooking that sauce probably for 1,000,000 years, and everything would taste the same. There would be no benefit to having the garlic in there, and there would be no benefit to having the onion in there because you'd have to cook it so far to get it to be chewy. So it's just highly not recommended to put anything in there raw when it comes to onion and then garlic, basically your vegetables in that way. If you want them to taste like garlic and you want it to taste like onion, our trick is to caramelize what we want caramelized and add it in. So I'm going to pop these guys in here.
And that'll get you a lot more of a sweet flavor out of those ingredients too. The garlic gets a nice sweet garlicky flavor.
Yeah.
Not spicy. Same with the onions. They get a nice sweet flavor.
Yeah. It basically, I think when you roast that garlic like that, you're basically making it so that vampires can eat it, I think.
Fair
Vampire friendly. And obviously you want your sauce to be vampire friendly. And so I'm just kind of mixing everybody in here. I'm going to hold back for a couple of seconds before I add in my herbs. And the only reason I'm doing that is I want that wine to cook off. If you add your herbs, your fresh herbs, too quickly to your sauce, you run the risk of having them disintegrate, and then you actually lose the flavors that they would offer to you if you put them in, a couple of moments before you feel like your profile is built. And so because this is a webinar and you're all sitting there hopefully just dying of starvation at this point because you can smell this sauce, I'm going to actually start putting some of the other guys, my other ingredients in there, and I'll finish up the rest of this sauce as, letting it all marry, once we're done with the webinar, and we're going to feast our faces off because it smells too good in here.
Get a bag of chips.
All right, so my two staple herbs. If you joined us last class, we talked about how to save and preserve herbs. If you didn't, I'm going to tell you what I did here. So I had added a little bit of chopped up basil into an ice cube tray, covered it with oil, and I froze it. Because just like Murphy's Law, my basil plants phased themselves out before my tomatoes were ready for us to make a sauce. So I had to preserve my basil so that I could use it for my sauce prior to being able to just use it together. So all I did was I thawed out 2 of the ice cubes that I had made with the olive oil in it. And I'm just going to put my olive oil and basil right into here. And so I did this 2 weeks ago, and it's everything's normal. It smells amazing. It smells like I just chopped it. So that's a win. That's a big win. My oregano, on the other hand, is far more prolific than my basil plants were this year. So we have oregano. It's huge. It's like a bathtub's worth of oregano. We like a lot of oregano. I love the flavor that it gives to it. It just really, really mixes well with all of the other flavors. So we probably go a little heavier with our oregano. Again, you do whatever amount of the things that you want to do. It's all on what you love. There's really not much you can do wrong to a sauce. So I'm going to pop all of that in there and stir it. This little ingredient here is my secret ingredient. And the reason why I say it's my secret ingredient is because depending on when you start making your tomato sauce, meaning like what time of year that you're making your tomato sauce, the first ones that come out sometimes can be a little less acidic as far as the ones that come out now, at the end of summer, they can be a little bit more higher in acid. These sauces that you make with all your different tomatoes will have different levels of acidity. And ways that you can cut an acidity with your tomatoes is by adding some component of sweet. Now, it doesn't mean just go, chuck it in sugar, although you absolutely can. It means that you have to think about what components you're going to add to your sauce that are sweet, which is why we added the caramelized onion. That adds a little notch of sweet. We added caramelized garlic, and that's going to add a little notch of sweet. And the wine that we used is almost bone dry, but it has a tiny little element, imperceptible, of sweetness, and that actually adds to the flavor. So you want to try your sauce to see how acidic it is before you go adding in any sweetener, because you may have already tamed down the acid with other things that you've added to the sauce. So I'm going to quickly try it, and you're going to want to try it at every step of the way to find out what you want to add more or less of. So that's pretty great. It doesn't need too much sweetness, but it definitely needs a little bit of salt and pepper. And the wine is actually almost bubbled off. All I can taste is like a really beautiful grapey flavor of the wine, but I don't taste the the alcohol or the booziness of it. So I'm going to add a little salt now, and I'm going to do that before I add in my honey, because sometimes when you add the salt after you've added in your honey, they can kind of affect each other a little bit. So the honey will seem more sweet. So I want to stir in some salt. I'm going to be a tiny bit aggressive with my salt. That looks like a lot, but we are using a kosher flaked salt, and the kosher salt is not far less, but it's a little less salty than the, what is that?
Standard iodized.
Yeah, iodized. Yeah. And so I'm going to take one last little try. Yeah, so that, to me, that's just screaming for some meatballs, some garlic bread, gluten-free for my homies. Maybe meatballs, maybe shrimp, maybe all of them.
All of it.
What, your homies aren't gluten-free?
Some of them are.
My homies are. All right. So I'm not actually going to add in my honey that I put in here. I think that that's going to be really perfect with all of the other things that we're going to do with the sauce. Like once we add our protein in there, whatever it is, and once we add in, you're going to be putting it on top of your pasta. So I actually think this one's going to be okay, because the sweetness of everything else was just enough. What we would do now, if we weren't on camera, is eat the heck out of that sauce. So we're going to wait until you're not watching us. If we wanted to not serve this tonight, and we wanted to save this sauce to use later in the winter when you're just dying for fresh tomato sauce and not tinned tomatoes, we do this in several different ways. We would actually cool this sauce down. We would put it into a vacuum pack bag, and we would vacuum pack actual little baggies of sauce, and we would just freeze it flat. The great reason that we do that is we can boil in the bag our sauce to quickly thaw it, pour out the sauce, add your proteins into your pot, and it's basically where you left it off, however many months you go back to it. Another thing that we do, we actually do this one a lot, is we will freeze it actually in mason jars, the glass jars that you're used to typically seeing. It sounds maybe like weird to think that you would freeze glass, but I did it on accident and then realized that I could do this all the time. Be mindful when you're freezing your sauce to leave some headspace in there, because your sauce will expand up. So I always say, leave it at almost 2 inches from that top, like a really good chunk. And a pro tip, after you put your sauce into that mason jar to freeze it, you're going to pour a tiny bit of olive oil on the top of it. That olive oil is going to float right on top of the sauce. That's going to stop it from getting any freezer burn. And we have tried our sauce a year later, because we accidentally forgot one in the back of the freezer, and it tasted exactly the same. So I would say you can keep it in your freezer for about a year. We did. It was tasty.
As long as it's not a freezer that does auto defrost. Like we have a chest freezer downstairs. Yeah. Not our regular freezer.
Yeah. I mean, we opened that we were total food geeks, so I think it's no surprise that we would have a freezer for our goodies. Another thing you can do, if you don't do the freezer bags, if you don't want to do Ziploc containers or glass containers, you can actually just pour it in a baggie cold, Ziploc your baggie, lay it flat, and that will actually freeze as well. We also do hard can, and hard can basically is, when your sauce looks like this, we've processed this. This is now shelf stable, so this will just sit in our pantry until we're ready to use our sauce. We, as you heard earlier, we will jar our sauce before we add any of our ingredients so that we can customize it. But This takes about 45 minutes to process it through your canning situation. You would either add lemon juice or a little bit of citric acid. Follow all of your food safety, rules. Read your citric acid. Follow a good recipe, and make sure you stay food safe when you're doing hard canning. Not that botulism is something that happens to super often, but I think that's like you just don't get botulism.
Avoid that one.
Just avoid it. Yeah, it's avoidable.
But when you do it right, it does last. It's shelf stable for over a year.
Yeah.
It really does last a long time. It doesn't take up freezer space. We keep it down in the basement in a dark room.
Yeah.
It will last quite some time.
Yeah. And we will use this base, this unflavored base. We will use this for ketchup, for barbecue sauce. If you wanted to make a tomato paste, you would actually, before you can it, you would take your sauce that you've, juiced down and cooked down 75%. You would put it in a glass baking dish, very similar to a casserole dish that you saw us using earlier. You would actually put that in your oven, and you would bake it down until it was a very thick, dark, like cracking paste. I mean, literally, it's tomato paste. We do that a lot because we use tomato paste in everything. Soups, I mean, my gosh, we use it all. So all of this is to say, you can take that tomato and you can turn that single tomato. It has a very broad future, and the tomato can grow up to be anything it wants to be. Salsa, barbecue, ketchup, sauce, the world's its oyster. I don't think you would put sauce with oyster. Oh, maybe cocktail sauce, which you can also make. How's that? All right, do you think we covered it all?
I think so.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
And as you can see, it was really fast to go through those tomatoes. It doesn't take long. We enjoy doing it on the weekends. One of our greatest hobbies is gardening and preparing that food to share with our friends.
Oh, yeah.
So, we really enjoy it, and that's what we do. We chop together, grind it together, cook together.
Yeah.
It's just a lovely, it's an activity we really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. All right. Well, thank you for watching this.